Fabulous. So I'm Helen Joy and my business is People Spark. I've got, 15 years of recruitment experience where I was a temps consultant, perms consultant, business manager, and then spent the majority of my time actually in the training team, training those recruiters, training those business managers. So I've got a really broad experience across the recruitment industry. And now my business is focusing on management development across all sorts of different sectors, but I've still got, my heart is still very much in the recruitment industry. I'll let Brian introduce himself.
Thanks, Helen. My name is Brian Cregan. I'm the founder director of Recruitment. I've been in the industry for almost 15 years as well, starting off as a business manager and working my way through to director, including both UK and European recruitment too. The reason why Helen and I kind of got into these webinars is Helen's L&D background. But something I did for my previous employer was business improvement, where we worked with different offices to improve everything around the recruitment process. So, you know, from processes through to service, through to, you know, effectively sales as well. And that's kind of the blueprint behind Recruit as well, is working with businesses and agencies to do the same. So hence these webinars kind of give you a little bit of a tidbit on each element. And today's one is hopefully going to be pretty interesting with regard to the impact of brand management and recruitment.
Fabulous. So this is something that we both feel quite strongly about, like the last one. So we will be in charge of making sure that we keep each other off our soapboxes as well when we talk about this. But it is something that is very, very important. And I think as recruitment businesses don't always think about it in terms of their own brand in the marketplace, or even thinking about how they protect their clients' reputations and brands in the marketplace as well. And as an employer, as a direct employer, because we do have a mix of recruiters and internal recruitment and HR people on these calls, as a direct recruiter, it is really important that you're really, really conscious of this and how this is impacted. So I'm just going to hand over to Brian to talk about what is an employer brand.
So thank you, Helen. Again, what we'll do to everyone on the call, if this is the first time, we have a Q&A at the end, and if we have no more than say 12 or 13 people, we'll open it up to actually people asking questions. But if you have anything in the interim, please put it into the chat box, and we'll answer where we can. So what is employer brand? Well, I'm very lucky to be married to somebody who works in marketing. He's an MD for a marketing company, and they talk about brand quite a lot. However, employer brand is a little bit different to what we classify as brand. For me, I would classify it as the human element of brand. So Helen, if you could. So it's about how an organization, their values, their people strategy and policy. And what is interesting from employer brand, both from those people on the call who are recruiters and those who are hiring managers or HR, is that effectively, as a recruiter, you've got two brands you're managing if you are talking to candidates about your client. And as a hiring manager or HR individual, you are the face of the brand when it comes to people. And I think sometimes we forget that. And we talked about this a few weeks ago on the candidate experience. But for me, there's a massive tie in there between you keeping your brand high, your employer brand, as well as the candidate experience. Thanks, Helen. So effectively, it's ethical perspective, and that word is interesting. Perspective. Every individual will have their own perspective on what is good, what is bad, and what is indifferent. So I think that when you think about brand, you need to consider that everybody has got their own viewpoint, and they'll come at your situation or their experience of a situation from a very different point of view. So what I want to do is share a couple of slides with you to move some things. So building an employer brand. So there's kind of four elements of that. Now we're not going to go into employer branding per se, because this is all about the full kind of HR employment brand, but healthy work culture, engaging social media presence, and we're going to talk about that in a couple of slides time, shared platforms for open sourcing, and then things like charity. And you'll see from some of the stats coming up what candidates actually look for. And you'll see the first number there, which is 75% of candidates will research a firm's reputation, so that employer brand, even before they go in. And that's no different if you're a top recruiter trying to influence, negotiate your candidate. We've all been there, for any of you who are mainstream recruiters, where a candidate at the 11th hour will pull out of a job because their friend Steve or Jane has told them this is a terrible company to work for. And actually, that's employer brand. With the advent of social media, people can do a lot more now with regard to researching not just the company, but also the individuals and what they stand for. 83% of employers say that employer brand plays a significant role in the ability to hire talent. So whether that's direct hires or you as an agency. And again, for those of you on the call who I know a few people here who are ex-colleagues, you'll know the difference between when people say, I wouldn't come to this agency or that agency. And if you are now a startup business, that takes on a whole different mantra about the importance of people coming to you as a recruiter, and secondly, as a business. And then finally, 69% of candidates would not accept a job in a firm with a bad reputation. And as you'll see in the forthcoming slides, there's quite a lot with regard to that, why and how people don't take a job, what was their experience. And a lot of it is to do with the recruitment process and the way businesses, look at their people as human beings or as a number. Over to you, Helen.
Okay. So whether you are managing it or controlling it or not, you as a business have a brand already. You already have an employer brand. Your local marketplace will already discuss you as an employer. So that means that your brand is already out there, and it might not be one that you want. When I worked in the Bath and Bristol areas, we had Virgin as one of our clients, and we put people in their call centre in Trowbridge. And their brand was, it was almost kind of national service, that everybody had to go and do at least like a 6-month stint at some point before they were allowed out of Trowbridge, because virtually everybody had worked there at some point. And it had an okay employer brand. It was all right. It was great for the people that managed to progress, but not necessarily for everybody that went through there. So the first thing you need to do is actually establish what your brand is. So that means understanding how the different stakeholders perceive your brand, and that is internally and externally. So actually putting some work in to find out how you're perceived as an employer. So it might be questionnaires to the staff that you already have, it might be talking to people, doing some questionnaires out into the local marketplace, or talking to local agencies. All those people that are phoning you and asking to be on your preferred supplier list, actually ask them what they think and what their perception of your brand is. So once you've actually got that information, you can spend some time then analysing that information and understanding what the company actually stands for and how you then need to change that. So once you know what it is, actually work out what you want it to be, what you want it to be perceived as within the local market. So what are the benefits of working there? What are its values? What does it stand for? And then stage 3 is putting those into a coherent strategy and implementing that. So making sure that your employer brand is recognisable internally, that it's something that your employees and the people that already work with you are actually talking about. And those are the words that they're using when they talk about you. And then making sure that you have some form of communication as to how that's fed out into the marketplace. And that can be the wording that you use in adverts, in the different things that you use as your behaviours within the business, the wording and the behaviours that you use to interview for. So all of those things are being consistently communicated through that process. And then measure those. So actually go back to the people internally and see if those words are recognised, see if those figures have actually improved from beforehand to later on. Because I run my own business, and as I get bigger and I bring people in and I employ them, I don't want people to be whispering about where they work. I want people to be really proud of the fact that they work in my business. I went to an interview once, many years ago, for Safeway, the supermarkets. That tells you how long ago it was. And I didn't tell anybody because I was a bit embarrassed, because Safeway weren't the poshest and the best supermarket there. So I didn't actually want to tell anybody that that's where I was being interviewed. And that is what you absolutely do not want as an employer, or as an agency as an employer, or as an agency working on behalf of your clients as well, is you don't want people being too embarrassed to say where that job is for.
Thanks, Helen. Well, I tell you, working for Safeway is nothing. I work for the check centre, the only place where the you as the cashier had a mask on. It was only a summer over this. It was only a summer. What I want to talk about is the positive impact of brands. So I've broken this into two areas, so principles and actions. So principles effectively are the offering to prospective talent and clients. And the split there is done on talent would be for a direct employer. So what are you offering people? And similarly for a recruiter, the principles of what are you offering clients? Because it's a little bit more than just a transactional bit of work. Lifestyle goals. So again, as Helen's just said there, you go to an interview, do you feel comfortable? Does this, when we talk about positive impact of brand, does this help an individual by going to a company or a business? Does it help them achieve their lifestyle goals? And I do wonder on the call, how many people talk about that at the very start when you're interviewing candidates? Or if it's a direct application, how much is done with regard to the almost will over skill? And I think it's a lost art a little bit with automation. Thanks, Helen. And then human engagement. So a lot of feedback I have. I have an element of my business which is working with private clients, and the feedback is sometimes horrible. And I think those who do well with regard to the brand understand the principle of human engagement, that it's two human beings or three human beings having a conversation about, it's a transaction. Yes, it's going to work for them, but actually you're playing to somebody's,
Sorry.
It's all a bit mad.
Oh.
It's all about two people actually connecting with each other. So on that, what actions can we take to provide a positive impact? Communication, and you'll see from the negative side what bad communication looks like, but positive communication really has an impact on the brand. The speed of hire, that goes for agency recruiters with regard to your client. But if you think about it again, what are human beings looking for? They're looking to go into a process, and for a process to start and finish pretty quickly, whether that's they get the job or they don't. And please, let's think about that some people will not get the job, but you can still promote a positive brand image if you communicate correctly and they've not gone through a laborious process only for 3, 4, 5 weeks later to be told you've not got the job. And then that ties in with ease of transaction. We live in a consumerist world. Everything is transactional. We click a button on our phones and something comes up. We click a button on our TV, or we talk to the TV and something comes up. But actually, when we think about the process of recruitment, how much is the ease of transaction? And before I go into the negatives, just to kind of give you a bit here, and if anybody here is from the public sector, I do apologize to some extent. But if the public sector would please change their job descriptions and application process, I could die a very happy man. I'm working with someone just now with a job description, 16 pages, 16 pages. I'm trying to work on their CV. I'm reading and reading and reading. No wonder we struggle to put good people in at times, because I wouldn't look at that. And in the process, it would be easier to get into the Tower Bridge, to be honest. I get into MI5 quicker than I could get into a job working for I believe it's what are they called? Oh, I won't say it, don't worry. So finally, just coming on to the image, and I think this is for me, one of the most interesting things about transactional through to improving a brand. Just looking at that without answering, where do you sit? Are you EB1? Are you EB2? Or are you EB3? And by that, you'll see that there's 7 key elements there with regard to brand. Do you just fill jobs for your employer? You know, employees, cannon fodder. They are dollar signs. There's plenty of them. Don't worry if we kind of, pardon my French, if we piss this person off, there's another 100 people that can take this job. There's an abundance of talent. It's just a functional. It's all very matter of fact. It's all very 1975, if you ask me. It's going back to things that we used to do. You'll see as brand has moved on, it's engagement. And you'll see a lot more of the word in EB2 about employee. So the employee talent scarcity. Each individual is their own talent. Functional, but emotional. You'll see multiple careers. So that means they're moving on and they're being able to talk about their previous employer. And Helen and I have just spent the last 20 minutes talking about our previous employer, because that's where we met. Some good, some bad, some indifferent. But the fact is, when you move on to different companies, you have a lot to be able to talk about. And then EB3, which is kind of we now live in this much more engaged world, making the world a better place. The focus on stakeholders, and stakeholders are everybody, not just the CEO of the company, but actually the person who's come to join you on day one after they've left school. They're also as important a stakeholder. Your employees are assets. I was in a call with an agency yesterday, and we kind of posed the question to each other that when you look at the supply chain, you've got the CEO, you've got the company, you've got the types of job, and at the bottom's always the recruiter. The recruiter a lot of times sits at the bottom of the supply chain because they're there to be done. But what it showed me just flipping it when I was doing this, the prep for this, that the human element sits at the bottom. And I wonder why that is. We'll talk about difference. You know, I posted something this morning about diversity on my LinkedIn page, but human beings should be at the forefront of everything we do, because that's what makes everything happen. Without the human being, nothing happens. In recruitment, let's take on 100,000 jobs. We have no one to fill them. So I think employees or human beings as assets, optimizing human potential. So not just a set of skills, functional, emotional, spiritual. We're all becoming softer rather than this old, kind of dry your eyes. And I saw a post yesterday by someone saying, "Quit crying, Sally." And I thought that's just so wrong on so many levels. We're changing, we're evolving as human beings to understand the more emotional side, and employer brand and people going through a process, that's vital that you do understand that. A blended work-life balance, we've been hearing that for a while, and then community. And Helen and I were just touching on that about LinkedIn, that we feel it's becoming more of a community in the last 9-10 months under the global situation we're in. But I think it's important to look at the employer brand from a recruitment process, that where do you sit? If you are doing day-to-day recruitment right now, are you EB1? And as one of my consultants used to say, stack them high, sell them cheap. Didn't really like that. Are you EB2? You'll invest a little bit more. Or are you EB3? Are you creating an employer brand for your client, for you, your business, and for people who want to come and work with you or for you? Then the negative impact. I need to be careful I don't go too far onto this one. For those of you who've been on before, you'll know I love my stats. An unhappy candidate could make such negative remarks. Now, what is interesting, when I started out in customer service in the last millennium, I like saying that, makes you sound like Methuselah. I was always told by my boss, if you give a bad service, that individual will tell 7 people. Well, actually, with social media, you may as well say that's 700 or 7,000 or even 7 million, because you can put something onto a post on whatever, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, MySpace, Bebo, whatever you've got, people get to see it. And again, back to it's there. Is it rhetoric or is it reality? It doesn't matter, because the minute it goes onto a post, it becomes reality. Approximately 65% of candidates say they never or rarely receive notice from employers. And I have to back that up. I have a private client who went for a marketing director role. 2 weeks ago. She got feedback on Monday to say she wasn't being considered. It was an email, and it was a generic email. Just absolutely wholeheartedly unacceptable. And for me, I made a note of who that business is, because they're not. I'm not representing her. She's representing herself. But for me, I was so incensed by this that I would quite happily have put on my LinkedIn if I felt it wasn't unprofessional to out that company, because they're a very big organization. They have a perceived excellent brand. Well, unfortunately, not now, because she's a very well linked person. I'm sure she'll be telling other people this. And for me, I will certainly, if I hear someone saying I'm applying to them, I would say do it with this in mind. And then a poll carried out by a major UK recruitment agency. Helen and I know this agency very well. I know some of you on the call probably do. Of over 4,000 people, nearly 3/4 of respondents said a bad recruitment experience would harm the relationship with that brand. That bad experience more often than not came down to communication and feedback. And now what I want to show you is, if Helen just clicks once, or twice in fact, Virgin Media. So we've mentioned them once. This isn't public domain, by the way. I'm not doing the unprofessional thing by outing someone. It's now used very much as a case study, and I used it in the last few years as well whilst training. But they undertook a review of their experience, or their recruitment experience, and they found that they'd lost 4.4 million in sales because of a poor candidate experience. Now, this Virgin Media are not the only ones, but I think the fact that they posted this to say they'd made changes, and also what Helen just said there as well about, you know, you have these businesses where you must do your 6 months before you get a real job. This just shows you that the impact of your agency, your client, or the HR hiring manager and your business. 4.4 million is a huge amount of money. Yes, I grant you 130,000 applicants had applied to work there. It's a huge business, but that's irrelevant. It's all about the kind of horses for courses. If you're a small business, could you afford to lose 0.4 million? I would probably say in today's current market, you couldn't. And then if you look to the bottom left, Helen's clicked up there about Brandon Savage. I don't know who Brandon Savage is, just to tell you, but I was having a little look through to think, you know, am I, what I'm talking about, do I have some backup to this? Brandon Savage is a person in tech who in January 2011 posted about why recruiters are bad for your career. Now, the only reason it's sitting there is that still sits in the public domain. We're almost 10 years in from when this guy posted it. And it's a blog about his experiences of recruiters. Now, Brandon Savage is not the spokesperson for all of recruitment, but I thought what was interesting is that still sits in a public domain. So with regard to brand, he's not necessarily mentioned a company, but he's mentioned recruitment as a brand. If you take it in its simplest format, it still sits there. So if you think about that from a brand perspective, if people are complaining about we had no communication, no feedback, that will sit in a public domain for weeks, months, and years to come. And it just takes one person that you're trying to win over as a business, as a client. What happens if they look at that and think, well, actually, they're not invested into their people? And for me, this brand webinar really ties back to, as I mentioned earlier, to that customer experience, or that candidate experience, I should say, because if candidates are not happy, they will talk, they will post, and that will have a direct impact on your brand as an employer, and which ties into your brand overall.
Thank you, Brian. I'd just like to point out that I was not recruiting for Virgin Media in 2014. I'd stopped recruiting for Virgin Media in 2010. That says everything in itself.
Now we know why it went wrong.
It's a shame Patrick Graham's not on this call. We know exactly who that was. Who was the person who made it such a great experience beforehand. Okay, so in summary, it is really, really important that you actually create an employer brand. you have one already. It's about you taking control of that and actually putting out the brand that you want to be perceived as in that marketplace. And your current employees and candidates are great marketing tools. So there are some fabulous websites that have great career pages that are so evidently care about their employees, because it shows in everything that they've put into that particular part of their website, and you know that those principles flow through to their recruitment process, and also to the rejections of the people that aren't actually going to be successful. So you already have that brand. Make sure that you're in control of it and make sure that you've created the brand that you want to have there. Reconsider your process. You know, sit down and think about what is our recruitment process. So we talked about this back in week 1, wasn't it? What is your recruitment process? What is every stage in that process for? What outputs do you want out of each stage, and how is that going to be perceived from that candidate's perspective, and how is that going to be felt as a candidate? Communication and feedback, definitely the most important elements. We've both had our little soapbox moments about feedback over the weeks, haven't we? It is absolutely critical, and it impacts so much. And you can have a fantastic process and you can have the wonderful careers page, but if you don't communicate properly with candidates throughout that process and they don't get a feedback, all of that can be completely undone in one actual act of recruitment. And be honest about the culture in your organisation. Different cultures suit different people. If you are a nice, fluffy, soft family environment, make sure that that comes across so that you're recruiting the people that want to work there. If you are a very, very driven, innovative, fast-paced, long hours environment, be honest about that, because again, that will appeal to the right people that fit into that organisation, which means you're getting the right people the first time round as well. Anything else to add on the summary, Brian? Nope. Okay, so what we'll do, I will stop sharing for the moment, and then what we will do is open up to questions. If anybody's, so it's quite a small group, so we can probably unmute everyone. Oh, yeah, so any questions? Any questions from anybody? Oh, very quiet this week.
I don't, it's not a question, but when I was looking at the role, it's interesting. I applied for those, because ironically, I don't like Rhetorics, even though I am one now, which is quite ironic. So I did a little bit myself, and there was one particular business that I didn't approach, and I got a phone call from a rhetoric about, who's actually Tim Vi, who's a colleague we all know. And he rang me and said, "You're going to laugh when I tell you who this is. I think you'd be great for it." He gave me the name of this business. I won't give the name, even though they wouldn't mind, because trying to change things. But I'll see if anyone can guess it. And he said, he told me it wasn't. I just laughed and said, "Absolutely no chance." I said, "Culturally, we're not on the same stratosphere." He said, no, they're trying to change things massively. So they'd always kind of had a background of growing people internally. They had a culture of kind of smash and grab, Porsche driving, big watch, big not, in the tight pink shirts.
Andy, you're...
Everything you probably stereotypically hated about IT recruiters in the 1990s.
Andy, you're breaking up quite a bit.
But
Yeah.
Massively trying to change their culture and their image and brand at the moment. They've actually hired a CEO externally for the first time ever, I think, from a publishing background. The new UK MDs from their life science business, again, rather than the IT side. And they're also, the overarching company name, they're, I think they're slowly moving towards using that for everything now, obviously the individual brand of the business. So it's interesting, obviously, that, and I actually did go for the interview, and it did feel very. Yeah.
Oh, Andy, you.
Okay. So turn my video off then.
Yeah, you're kind of your video's gone off, but it's a bit better.
Yeah, I don't know. I won't go through the whole thing again, but basically, it was. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No. Is that better?
Yeah. No, could hear you a bit better now.
No.
So effectively, Andy, you were saying that you were approached about an agency that you didn't have the best.
Right. So can you not hear really?
No.
Move on. We'll move on. Okay. Yeah. So this, you probably heard none of that, but basically, it's an agency.
Yeah, we can hear the first bit, and then you just disappear.
It's as if Zoom doesn't want to see the agency.
I'll move on. I'll move on.
Oh, okay, brilliant. Thanks, Andy. If your bandwidth improves, come back. Right, I'm going to mute you now, Andy.
Yeah.
Right. So, anybody got any other kind of experiences or questions or comments around the area of brand and how it works for? Sorry, excuse me.
I think it goes back to the old adage, Helen and Brian, of what you're encapsulating this morning, is that very much that a good experience, whether it be a customer experience, no matter whether it be in retail, whether it be in the recruitment sector, whether it be anywhere else in any walk of life, is that a good experience, somebody will tell maybe 2 or 3 people, all right? A bad experience, people will probably tell 10 to 12 people. And again, obviously with the advent of technology that we have available to all of our fingers now, and the immediacy of that, that, you know, obviously, as you were saying this morning, is that, you know, a bad experience or a bad engagement can, you know, very much undermine a brand very, very quickly.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's that kind of recognition of the fact that you have an employer brand already. It's out there. People have a perception of what you are like as an employer and what it will be like to work for you. And that, for a lot of people outside of your organization, is based on the experiences of people that have interviewed there. So we all will know some people who work in an organization, but we probably know more people that have been through interviews in places. And so that is what we're going to be making our judgments on. So it's really important that you're in control of that. And it needs to be, and again, if you're an agency recruiter, it's really important that you can develop the kind of relationship where you can be quite honest with your clients about what their brand is in the marketplace, because we've all done it. You know, I remember phoning up people, and half the time I wasn't allowed to tell them who I was recruiting for, which is always one hand behind your back and your mouth shut, isn't it? But when you would get to the point where you'd tell them who you were recruiting for, there was one particular client where 40% of people would go, nah, no thanks. And you know, be like, well, have you ever, you know, who do you know? Oh, well, I just know that I know people who've worked there and it's awful, and it's, yeah, oh, it's this division. Yeah, well, no. And it's that awareness and having to then go back to that client and say, right, this candidate you've asked me to approach doesn't want to work for you because of these reasons, because this is their perception of what working for you is like. And that can be a hard conversation to have. And you wouldn't necessarily have that conversation with a client in your first conversation when you're taking the role from them, but it's about developing that consultative side, isn't it? And actually being able to be perceived as the expert in your role in this process, rather than somebody who's just going to chuck them a load of CVs. And I think that for me is the difference between being a recruiter and being a recruitment consultant.
And I think just to add on to that, the other when it's direct application is even things that you do through the process. The interview is so important. Recently, I know someone had been at an interview where they said, well, 2 of the line managers, it was a Zoom call, one was on his phone and the other went away for a little bit. So, you know, you're in an interview scenario. Yes, we're living in a fake environment, shall we say, but it's a fake environment that's going to stay to some extent going forward. But someone's sitting doing this going, there's not really much buy-in. Oh, yeah. And again, that perception comes on to, I might think the company's wonderful, but I sat at interview and thought, do you know what? No way. Because all I'm asking for is an hour's time for someone. And again, how that affects them, because the one thing I kind of missed off my notes, we talk a lot about not getting the job and employer brand, but if you think about it, how many people on the call and in general go to an interview just to see, because they're a competitor and they may be offering something more, but you go to that competitor, you sit in an interview and you have that experience. I then come back and think, I don't want to work for them and my job really is good. You then are going to try and get them at every given stage because of your experience. So not just the employer brand, but also the fact is you've just probably, I don't know, found the fire in somebody who's up against you to try and beat you because of an experience they've had. And it all deems to the one thing, employer brand loses money. And that's a poor employer brand loses money. And no business can run that way. And at the end of the day, profits still are king or queen. But the human being within that is the person deciding whether we do it or not. So again, something to consider are, when you're speaking to your clients about interviews, or if you are the person hosting interviews, are you engaged back to that human factor with that individual sitting in front of you?
I think that's it. It's that being conscious that at every single stage of that process, every interaction that anyone has with your organization is positively or negatively reinforcing their perception of you. And we talked back in session 1 about talent benching and proactive recruitment and having a group of people that used to be ready and waiting to want to come and work for you. And that surely is every employer's dream, isn't it? That you've got the pick of the best people because you've been maintaining that communication, maintaining those relationships for the 6 months that it takes for the right role to come up. But because that's all been so positive, and as I say, there was one company that 40% of people didn't want to work for, but the 60% of people who did want to work for them was because of that, was because we'd worked so hard to make sure that in that particular area, they had a really positive reputation, that their managers were known for being fantastic at what they did, that when they interviewed people, they would connect with them on LinkedIn afterwards and maintain those relationships themselves, as well as us doing that. So they felt like they were part of that organisation before a role even came up that was right for them. And it takes time, but it's a positive time investment, because it's an investment in your employer brand, which effectively creates that positive spiral, which means great people are sitting there literally waiting for you to phone them to say that job's finally come in, that job's finally been released that we can put you into. And it is amazing how that can happen. And it takes 6 months, it takes a year, it can take a long time. And I think a lot of recruitment agencies aren't set up for that long-term investment in relationships. They're set up for fill as many jobs as you can this month, because that's our business model. But what is the beauty of being able to talk to and work with smaller organizations is that you've got a completely different way of looking at it. You are in it for the long haul, you're in it for the relationships, you're in it for, we were talking earlier about the company that we used to work for and the people that had been there for a very long time. And the reason that they were so successful in those jobs was because of those, and there's somebody looking at me now from there, and they were so successful because of those long-term relationships, because they had the brand reputation with those clients of being the best person in the market to go for those roles, because that's how it works. It's a proper cycle. And it's about managing that and doing that effectively and properly to be perceived as the person. I used to drive past a company, and I used to drive past this company and I'd look at it and I'd go, I want to work there. And I couldn't tell you what particular thing had led to me wanting to work there. It was the fact that it looked really nice and the people always looked really friendly, and everybody that worked there looked like they were really happy, and their adverts were always really positive and bright. And it's that, I can't even remember who they were or what they did, but I can remember driving past this building and wanting to work at that organisation. That's how the kind of feeling that you want to inspire in people, rather than, oh God, let's go and do our 6 months at Virgin before we're, you know, that's, it's not Virgin bashing. They're quite a good organisation to work for. Lots of people have very good careers there.
Who's doing it well just now, do you think? Can you mention anyone that's punching above their remit, if you like?
Well, I mean, without having a differentiation, but I think that Helen and I, again, just touched on this. With bigger agencies, with bigger numbers, they look at different metrics. So jobs on, calls made, call times, all of those metrics that really, they're numbers, and their numbers and stats can be manipulated. But I think when you go to smaller agencies who are, you know, and that probably goes for individuals who aren't led by numbers or those metrics, they're led by other metrics that are, you know, engagement numbers, turnover, anything that really adds value. I think that is the big difference. And I would say that, again, the model is changing in recruitment, that so many agencies, apart from the big generalists, are trying to do something a little bit differently, because let's be honest, we all do the same thing. We've all generally got the same tools to use, because if I said to you, well, I've got read.co.uk with my 12 million people, you could throw it back in my face. Well, I've got LinkedIn with 625. So we're all playing from that kind of field. But I think that the metrics used by a lot of the larger general agencies are based on output metrics. And I think that if you take that away and you look at smaller agencies who don't have the luxury of having a candidate pool of X thousand or a client, you know, pipeline of thousands, you've got to almost overservice that person. In our marketplace, Kev, not at the moment, it's been so quiet, I think, in Aberdeen, because, you know, it's been a bit of a double blow in the pandemic and the oil price. So I've not really heard or seen too much. But what has become pretty evident is a couple of agencies that I know of are trying to do things just a little bit differently, rightly or wrongly, but they've pulled away from the metric of how long have you been on the phone this week? How many calls have you made? It's about proper engagement.
Yeah, and I still see it. I don't know, I'm out of the game for 5 years, as you know, but I hear it and I see it, and you're right, the feedback, I'm not harping about the feedback, we've done that piece, but it's still from bigger firms as well, it's very generic, and it is, there's no substance to it. It doesn't make you feel, or anyone feel, like, you know, where did you fall down? Where can you improve? What can you do for the next time? I mean, surely that one little piece would set you apart. You know, I touched on this 2 weeks ago, you know, when I said, even that little snapshot of, well, there's where you fell down. That's what you could do different. Take that forward for your next opportunity. Oh, wow. Geez, you guys know what you're doing. I mean, I'd like to stay with you guys if you like, and go again for another opportunity, but I will improve on those pieces. I guess something small like that would make sense. But you're right, if there's a number on their head and there's a target on their back and they've got KPIs, that unless you fit every single box and you are that gold candidate, who are you? You know what I mean? That's how it feels, I guess.
I mean, I can get, so two things there. I think number one, you know, we talked about this a few sessions ago. Automation is great for recruiters, but why we get scared is, oh, automation is going to take our job. But I believe that automation should be there to take a part of our job away in order for us to be more human. So the bigger companies have got the bigger budgets to have better automation, better algorithms, better AI, whatever you want to talk tech, they've got the investment to do that. But it seems to me it's the smaller companies who still have got the ability to pick up the phone to say, listen, you know, the clients bought into them because automation's been used in the wrong way, because I can send a generic email saying you've not got the job, and I have this lovely screen in front of me of all of your nice faces and some of you hidden, but I can hit a button and it goes to all of you and says, dear candidate, or dear first name pre-populated, thank you for your time, you've not got the job, boom. Whereas actually, if we're using automation correctly in other parts of the job, then it allows us time as human beings to phone up to say, Kev, really appreciate it, however, and giving what we talked about, a proper reason why you didn't get the job, not because you're a middle-aged white man or you're of ethnic origin or your sexual tendencies. It's about, you know, the person we took had this, you didn't, if you improve the following elements, it would help you. And I think that's where automation plays a big game. And on the second point, I am going to name drop one agency because I work with them, and that's not why I'm doing it. But they have got one of their KPIs is actually interview preparation. And in all my time, I've never heard that as a KPI. I know a lot of people have done it, and I'm pretty proud that I brought to my teams this kind of idea as well. But these guys, rather than calls made to clients, they have a KPI of interview prep. And a lot of feedback from their candidates are, oh my God, no one's ever done this with us. Again, they're a bespoke agency. They work in a set field. But I thought that was a really refreshing thing when I was sitting, listening to what they were doing and looking at where they might have improvements, that they've moved away from the let's hit some numbers out to let's spend some time with that applicant, that job seeker, to try and get them the job. And they tell their clients they're going to do this as well, because they don't over prep them. They're just giving them the right prep. So I think, with regard to the webinars, it was kind of nice to have a group of influential people together to talk about, what we want to do, but what we want and what we should do isn't what we're doing. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of small business owners. We've got to eat as well. So where do we cut? And generally it's the candidate, and that's where we need to improve that. Talking about it is just one aspect. Actually preaching and living by that is a very different one. And that goes for hiring managers or HR professionals too, that we're all responsible to try and improve the reputation for recruitment through our candidates, because that's where it falls down more than clients. They sometimes see the value, sometimes I do say, but candidates a lot of times will say, well, actually, do you know what? With the advent of social media, why should I go to an agency? I can just apply myself.
Good.
Anyone else? Any other questions or comments? No.
It was very quiet this week.
Just hi all, by the way. Just touched on an experience I had recently. This is why I jumped on this call, essentially about brand. Is when I launched in February, I made a very big mistake of trying to be a bigger brand than what I was. My image in my head for my brand was larger than what my brand is now. It's the first go at doing this by myself. So Brian, I know you from Reed. Ashley DeCran sat with me for months and did your I had business improvement every week pretty much.
I apologize now, Ollie. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine. She's brilliant, and it really did actually help. There's lots of things that I picked up, but when I launched in Feb, I tried to be a bigger brand than what I was. And after the lockdown period, we sat down, my business partner and I, we sat down and said, look, actually, let's just go back to being small and humble. Went out and met with a client who's now our largest client. So I work in education, so it's a school, and they're working with a large national agency. And I said to him, why us? Why are you using us? What have we done differently? Can I ask? She said, you're the only person who's asked to visit us. We've not had a visit from our consultant for 2 years. And that slight little, and that business means everything to me. It's half my bookings that come through. That business, we service visit them, we call them, we're in contact with all the leadership team, everyone we need to be. But actually at the start, it was we just wanted to be kind of, like you say, transactional, click of a button, you call us. We're the big boys in the county. We're far from, and because we've humbled ourselves and gone back to that smaller, local, friendly brand, it's helped, and my business has grown literally sevenfold in 3 months because of that flick on my brand. So it's why I jumped on this call, especially.
Well, I think number one, fantastic. It's nice to hear, and I think on that flip side is if you think about what business improvement was about, it was we'd sometimes have visits for visits' sake. Let's tick a box. I've got to go on 8 visits. And funnily, just to kind of add to that, Ollie, I was the same. I said to Helen a couple of months ago, I thought I knew most things in recruitment. I knew how to network. Hence, I wrote business improvement. So this is the guide. I learned more in December and January of last year when I went on my own, that I was networking so badly because it was a tick box exercise. So kind of similar to you, I was kind of going back to a bad habit, and I can't say it was my previous company. That wasn't, I can't blame them. It was a habit of tick a box, go and see somebody and go and say you've been on a visit. And I realized that I was networking to the wrong people. And what I found for my businesses, most of my work has come from referrals, more than LinkedIn, more than social selling, because I go and speak to someone who says, Brian, I know someone that might use you, and they'll give me a call. And this happened yesterday. I have a client who is a very interesting man who emailed on Friday to a pretty big agency and said, you guys should meet each other. I'm here if you want to discuss. I was on a call yesterday, completely unprepared, and they started talking about business improvement. And they said, we've done a bit of research on you and we know who you are. And all of a sudden, from a strange email on Friday, and I for those of you who know me, I'm not a shy and retiring type, but my heart was beating at 2 o'clock yesterday. This is an all new, this may be who's going to meet me? And again, that same bit that people want, that personalized element of what you can offer. And what I found was I wasn't ticking a box anymore. So if I go to say, I'm going to meet you for a coffee, I can just meet you. I don't need to tick it and say, that's one of my 8 done. And it might not happen this week or next week, but you may get something across your desk and say, I tell you what, Brian could pick that up for me. And that's the same idea, the same principle, that it's brand, because we are human beings, we are the brand. And it really kind of gets me when you see gatekeepers, both in recruitment and non-recruitment, who give it the big I am, you can't phone, we don't take calls from agency, we don't do this. Actually, you're representing the brand of your company. Is that your company's policy, or is that you? Because whatever you're interpreting, if it is the company's policy, fantastic. You're following it to the letter of the law. But if it's not, you've all of a sudden, at whatever level you're at, you've decided to say, I'm not going to put you through, when actually that company may be crying out for the services of that. And I don't just mean recruitment, I mean whatever. And you think that's a brand thing that I phoned someone and they were so nasty to me. A, I wouldn't want to work there, and B, I wouldn't want them as a client. And it could be their first day, it could be their 10th year, they could be the CEO, or they could be a person that's on an internship. But their brand is following to the company brand. So, you know, it's such an emotive topic. We could talk about, it goes all over. But I think from a recruitment perspective, for me, the last thing I want to just say is it's about that human element. And that's where people get it wrong. We're dealing with other human beings, nothing else.
I'd just like to say, Ollie, I think part of that is that it's amazing how the authenticity and how going from this big I am, big shiny suit guys is to the, actually, this is us, we're going to come and meet you, this is who I am, and this is what I'm going to do for you. Because it's like Brian said, it's that human connection. It is, 1999 when I got into recruitment, and the first thing I remember being taught and learning was that people buy from people. There'll be some people on here will remember that phrase very well. And it is so true, because it doesn't matter who that person is, what level they are within the business. If they get on with you, if they like you, if they appreciate you, they will champion you within that organization. And that's why I think sometimes recruitment businesses don't spend as much time doing networking as they really should, because it's not fast enough for them. The best client I got from any networking I've done came 2 years after I'd met the person, and I got about 30 grand worth of business out of this person at this relationship in the end. And it was because she'd met me, she liked me, and she'd changed jobs twice in that time, and she could see me delivering training in this organization. And, and that is, if I'd have been working for somebody else and I was having to sit there and justify why I was doing these meetings, that wasn't the only client I got out of them, but it was, it's about that longer term relationship. And it amazes me even now, the amount of networking I do as a business owner, how few recruiters I come across. It really does astonish me. I don't know if that's just Oxfordshire or what, but there's virtually never any recruiters at the networking I go to. And there's 2. One's an ex-colleague of some of ours, and the other one was from Brook Street. And they are the only ones that do actually go out there and do it. And they're brilliant. They're both absolutely brilliant at what they do. And it is the fact that I am always, the people that I talk to HR, to MDs, CEOs, and quite often they will ask me, oh, do you know anyone who does recruitment? And I know two people, I know lots more people, but I know two people that I see on a regular basis that I trust and I have a relationship with, that I feel confident that I could recommend to my clients as well. And it just astonishes me that more recruiters don't do it.
I think my time in the last few months has been spent online quite a lot, like everyone else. But to keep it simple, when you talk about networking, Helen, we can't go out and meet people like we used to, but networking you can do online quite easily.
Oh, yeah.
All I've been doing is I've been looking at who interests me, business and person, what I'm interested in, and I've been connecting with them. And it's been a simple, how are you? How's things? How are you getting on? COVID affecting you? How's the pandemic in the UK? Trump, Biden in the States, when I'm talking to them. Europe, I'll talk about Brexit and the inbound and export and import. And are you ready? And suddenly we're just talking. And we just keep talking. And suddenly they've connected with me and they see my content and they're talking again. And then they'll go, well, what do you do? Well, I do what? Is that what you do? I've never sold once yet on LinkedIn. And it's all about that, what you're saying there about brand and awareness. Be yourself, post your content, be real, be human. And suddenly it won't be about you. It'll be, what do you do? Eventually they'll come, oh, this guy's great. We have great chats. I'm going to go to him because I know what he does now. It's keeping it that. It sounds simple, and it probably is that simple, but it's a place to communicate, a place to have chats, and then you'll find when they're ready, if there's something there from a purchasing point of view, they know who to go to.
Yeah.
Agreed. Well, I think that is us. It's almost 10:30. Thank you everybody for coming on.
Thank you.
A few messages. So I will answer them and get back. Next week is our last one of this series. And it should be a bit of fun actually. So we thought, because we're coming towards kind of Christmas, because it will be the 26th of November. So if you're that way inclined, you're within the month of Christmas.
Virtually
Christmas. A bit more about recruitment faux pas. So we're going to make it a little bit more interactive next week. So I hope you can join us. And if you know anybody else who's a good storyteller, who you know has got a good recruitment faux pas, we're not going to name names. I think that's only fair, because it would be a bit unfair. But I think it's good to kind of talk about those bits, because, joking aside, what we want to look at is these are the experiences that make you change the way you do something, or make you change the way you look at something. So it should be a pretty fun, hopefully, interactive session next week. So we'd love if you could join us, and look out for the invites on Friday and Monday.
Yeah, fabulous.
Thank
you everybody.
Very much.
Thanks again.
Thank you. It's been great.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.